What secret did you once know that has since become public knowledge? I knew my best friend was sleeping with our middle school gym teacher from the time he was 15 years old. The rumors spread the rest of my school time all the way through high school. When he was 20, they moved in together for almost a year. Then everybody knew it was true. Did she get fired? Or have a police investigation? She quit by the time we were juniors in high school. And absolutely nothing ever went to the police and no one got in trouble. He didn't stay with her though. She was nearly 20 years older than him. He has been married 4 years now and is now the same middle school's basketball coach. My astronomy professor in first year told my class about the very high probability that gravitational waves had been detected a week before they were officially announced. I am a patent lawyer. So lots of inventions that most people would find pretty boring. They usually eventually publish. This isn't super cool, but back in middle school, my best friend's mom worked for some sort of vending machine company and got to try Snickers peanut butter before it came out to the public. So I just got to try a pretty good candy bar a few weeks before it was released to everyone else. I worked for Warner Brothers Games division back in 2008 or so. They sent out some company-wide email jerking off about whatever big meeting they had and bragging about all the games that would be coming down the pipeline. Everyone on the floor got it at the same time. Took one look and said a variation of WTF is Mad Max, Fury Road. Not 2 minutes later there was a hastily written email explaining in very bold letters that internal communications are confidential and subject to NDA. etc. etc. Well, fire you. So basically you were in a extreme hype mode for 6 years for a new Mad Max movie? If so, I feel bad. That amount of hype for so long could break someone. That Jim had a thing for Pam. He confided in me on a booze cruise because we are really close friends. He was sad because she was engaged at the time. But you know what? I told him to never, ever give up. About the new Skyway at Walt Disney World. I knew about it when the Imagineers were still in the planning phase. Did a full series of artwork for the toy lineup for Avengers Infinity War. All the heroes in all their new outfits. I think most have been revealed by now though. This was over a year ago. It was cool to work on. The split up of Gavin Rossdale and Gwen Stefani. My wife's friend's sister was their nanny and we found out a month before it came out and was sworn not to tell anyone. The best bit was, all the tabloid blamed the nanny. So friend's sister called Gwen and asked her to set everyone straight and Gwen said no, you can't do that and to wait it out and it will blow over. That the risk associated with mortgage-backed securities was not being truthfully assessed and that the originators didn't give flying duck about the risk since they were able to sell them off 5 seconds after the deal was done, so the risk was no longer theirs. I knew it was my friend Kirby that was regularly cheating on the floor in front of the toilet in the bathroom in high school. Some kid walked in on him doing it and told everyone. I'm guessing out of the 2,200 kids in our high school, 2,000 of them probably heard about it. Well, I was an intelligence analyst back in the 90s. After the Berlin Wall came down and the USSR turned into Russia with glasnost and perestroika and all that shit, everyone was like the Cold War is over. Yay. Even people in the military were on board. Except for everybody that worked in intelligence. We were all like nope. They are going to fall back, regroup and keeping coming at us. It never ended folks. They just changed strategies. And it's not like we didn't try to warn people. Just nobody gave a shit. I mean, nobody that mattered. Also, 9/11. I mean not that specific attack. But we knew something like that was bound to happen after we destabilized Iraq. Saddam was a real son of a rick. But he kept a lockdown on his borders. After the Iraqi government collapsed, it was a ducking highway for every 2-bit jihadi looking to strap on and blow up some Yankees. And believe it or not, ducking up countries and their economies. Killing a bunch of non-combatants and turning into an eternal occupying force pisses people off enough to do that sort of thing. What I'm saying is that most of our current world political problems were not only entirely predictable, they were predicted. The decisions makers were warned of the consequences and they ducking did it anyway. Hardly a secret, but I knew Holly Willoughby was doing a baby cookbook before said baby cookbook came out because I overheard someone involved with the production talking loudly on the phone about it during a train journey. I knew about Patton Oswalt's wife's death before the press. A friend of mine is friends with Patton and he was in town for the Moon Tower Comedy Festival that year and we met up for coffee before his set and he told me about what had happened. I think that was the same day Prince died. Damn. That one broke my heart. You could tell he really cared about her and the whole thing crushed him. He caught a lot of shit for moving on so quickly. 2. People deal with grief in different ways and at different speeds. So I'm glad he's happy. I've only met him a couple of times and never more than a handshake and a how are ya. But he seems like a genuinely nice, fun-loving guy. The articles that he wrote about Michelle's death and how it affected him are real tearjerkers. The guy has a way with words. For sure. My mom worked for Aunt Corporate so she would bring home snacks for us that didn't hit the shelves yet. It was pretty cool. Some of the first things we were able to try were Doritos 3D, Sprite Remix, and the cereal bars with the milk frosting on the bottom. Somewhat the envy of our lunchrooms. The government held almost all of the lobsters in the Long Island Sound when using a new pesticide to spray for mosquitoes and paid all of the lobster fishermen large sums of money with tax dollars to avoid owning up to it. Wait. That still may not be public info. That Jimmy Savile was a child-raping son of Rick. This was back in the late 80s. It wasn't exactly a state secret. Many people knew. It's just the media that won't talk about it. As for the ducking BBC, strange that even to this day they still don't mention all those corpses he ducked when he volunteered to work in the mortuary at Stoke Mandeville Hospital. Or what he did during the long time he spent alone with the corpse of his adored mother. North Korean ballistic missile development having missiles that were able to hit the continental United States. The media acts like it is some new thing. But they've had the technical capability since the mid-90s, their missiles are just a bit more reliable now. I went to the Canadian premiere of The Last Jedi, so I knew all the spoilers 3 days before anyone else. It's actually really lonely because you can't talk about it with anyone. In HS, I knew we'd all one day be carrying around screen doodads and live our lives through them. Of course. Since nobody was back then. People thought I was the weirdo for carrying a PDA. I didn't even have access to live data. I'd have to sync up in the morning to get news and weather. And manually load some video clips onto it. It was a lot more work to be a dork back then. A photographer in my area was sexually harassing and even sexually assaulting models. Everyone in the industry knew and my agent got really mad at a girl for doing a test shoot with him. He was a friend of her friend. But no one in the city knew until the Me Too phenomenon when 2 of his victims filed a police report against him. And countless other women spoke up, both models and girls who knew him before he became a photographer. That there was going to be a spin-off show of The Big Bang Theory. My little brother auditioned for young Sheldon about a year ago. Because of him. There are lots of TV shows and movies that I know about pretty early on that I can't tell anyone about. Edit. Another movie I knew about early on, Wonder. I read for his taped audition. Where he read for August and Jack Will. My husband had a short-term contract at BioWare several years back. I got to see DA2 and ME3 in development. I know. People have opinions about those particular BioWare titles. But it was still a very cool experience that I couldn't tell any of my friends about at the time. I had to sign an NDA to get past the front desk every single time I brought him lunch. My cousin works as a reporter for a gossip magazine and knows a lot of things going on in Hollywood that aren't being reported right now. She knew for years what Harvey Weinstein was doing. She said it was an open secret in Hollywood but a lot of people were too scared to come forward or if they tried to they would either get blacklisted, threatened with a huge lawsuit or worse. Apparently one of the main reasons his abuse made headlines was because his brother Bob wanted to have him kicked out of his company. So Bob made the decision to make his abuse known and made sure a few women he knew were abused came forward. Also, there is a huge problem with sexual abuse and child pornography in Hollywood right now, and Mark Salling's death is being investigated by the FBI. They believe it wasn't a suicide but a homicide that was covered up. And apparently most of the child porn they found on his computer were all recent images. They think someone in Hollywood gave it to him, and most of the images were child actors. She also said that people like Steven Spielberg, Charlie Sheen, Bryan Singer and Dan Schneider are known for sexual abusing children. But it's the same problem as with Harvey Weinstein. People are scared to come forward, and if they do try they are blacklisted, sued or threatened by their legal team or worse. Back in 2012 I knew WF was opening unauthorized banking accounts. A banker opened 9 unauthorized business checking and savings accounts in my name. I became very suspicious when I received 9 debt cards in the mail in the following weeks. I panicked thinking someone stole my identity. I had to go to 3 WF banks before someone told me they had their suspicions that the banker was just trying to hit our monthly quotas to bonus. I freaked out and made them close all accounts. My husband is still convinced I was one of the first whistleblowers. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt starting a relationship. Knew about a year and a half before. That Matt Lauer was a creep. My college roommate worked on the Today Show and always had stories. The only thing shocking about him getting fired was that it took a cultural movement to get him out. My friend's dad worked for Paramount Pictures and used one of her sleepovers as an opportunity to show us 13-14 years old girls a screen of VHS of Mean Girls, so we knew how awesome it was before it hit theaters. The White House pressured the Challenger launch. Reagan was planning on talking to Krista McAuliffe during the State of the Union address. Remember, this was right after Iran-Contra. Firecall was a client of mine. That an archdiocese in New Jersey was harboring sexual predator priests and were going to get sued big time. A place I was working at was involved in supporting the Catholic Church in their case prep. I was a lowly intern at the time and didn't have access to much info. But they were paying us a lot and they paid us very quickly too. The Catholic Church is loaded and they're willing to spend a lot to protect themselves at all costs. From what I heard, we gave them a ridiculously inflated quote that was super high and they paid it all without even bothering to negotiate it down. I don't know if this counts, but my father worked for Hasbro and I got to test a lot of the toys before they came out. This was a long time ago, so it was mostly My Little Pony stuff lol, but it was pretty cool. That a certain director was going to be fired from a certain high-profile space fantasy movie series. I worked for one of the people that Kathleen Kennedy's office talked to about the director's drug problem. Throwaway because NDA. Wasn't really a secret rather than it not hitting stateside yet. My grandma came back from China with toys for me and my brother. They were Beyblades. These were legit compared to the ones that were released in America from what I assume were looser safety regulations. More durable plastic with a heavy metal weight in the center that was actually designed to create sparks when it hit the other Beyblade. We didn't understand what they were or how to play with them, so we kind of just shoved them underneath our beds till the anime became big. These things actually tore through the plastic on the American versions and it actually made my brother bleed once. The Trump dossier. I was at dinner with a friend and his dad who told us that we could not share what he was about to tell us. He proceeded to explain that he heard from a friend in Washington that the Russians apparently have blackmailed towards Trump based on a visit and a night spent with prostitutes. A week later the New York Times broke the story. My mom worked at Boeing in the early 2000s and knew about military drones before we all did. She really didn't say anything about them until they were announced either. We were just watching the news and she was like, oh, they're finally releasing that to the public? I knew my aunt, by marriage, was having an affair years before anyone else in my family did. We had gone to my uncle's house for Christmas one year and I wandered into their bedroom looking for a bathroom. But instead found my aunt with her tongue down one of my uncle's friend's throat. I was like 7 and grew up in a home with no married couples. So I totally didn't get what was going on. And it wasn't until years later when the whole thing, as well as multiple other affairs, came out that I realized and thought to maybe share the information with other members of my family. Kevin Spacey. In college, I went through a Kevin Spacey movie binge, and as I usually do, I started researching more about him. I'm a bit of a movie buff. But this I mean. Do any internet research on him 2011 beyond the surface level. And you'd know something was off. From the way he talked about his orientation, even for being closeted, it was weird. Like bringing up the subject of his sex life was highly offensive to him, to rumors of him being on the log for the fabled Lolita jet. I didn't want to believe it. But can't say the recent news was a great surprise. In 1983-87, an interesting friend of the family filled me in on many of the things that were eventually brought to light in the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats. And several that weren't. Survivor fans, I ran into Boston Rob and Amber in Mexico on their honeymoon. Before they announced their engagement and the fact that their whole wedding would be televised as a 3-hour special, I realized what was up when I asked to take a photo and they said we aren't allowed to, and I noticed the rings. My dad worked for Acura when the first Avengers movie came out. Acura put a lot of funding into the movie, which is why most of the cars you see are Acuras, and as part of the promotion, employees of certain dealerships were able to see it a day early with their families. It was surprising to see how much security they had. A girl with a metal detector probed you over before you entered the theater. You had to leave all electronics outside. And there were a couple of dudes up front with night vision goggles that just watched us the whole time. I found out Bill Cosby was almost completely blind when he performed at my local theater in the early 2010s. He needed help with everything and we, the stage staff, were told to help him move around. It was a huge secret. We weren't allowed to tell anyone. When he announced his blindness following the accusations against him, it felt like he'd been saving that card for a day like that and acted like it was new. It was gross. Can't fool me, Bill. One of the biggest Swedish pop hits of the 80s were written in secret by one of the country's most well-known artists. He wrote the song because they needed a hit. And he chose to be anonymous because he didn't want to draw attention from the band. I knew that years before it became well known to the public. I was told by a person from the Swedish music industry. It was known among professionals for like 20 years before it got public. I have a good friend who is a publicist in Hollywood for several A-list household names. So her just being in that circle. There's a few guys who have come out of the closet in recent years that I knew about beforehand. There's a few guys who are currently in the closet that I know about now. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Edit, and I've known about relationship contracts expiring between some very high profile couples who didn't break up. Found out Beyonce was doing the 2013 Super Bowl halftime show about 5 months before it was announced. My high school band director's brother and the company who was handling the FX for the halftime show. This is only cool if you work in fashion or love Beyonce, but I helped launch her Ivy Park line and knew about it about 9 months in advance. I never met her since I was very much a cog in the process. But it's extremely nerve-wracking to wake up in the middle of the night realizing you're one mistake away from being the anonymous duck-up who pissed off Beyonce. I work security when at a grocery store flagship store in the biggest city in my province. I hadn't heard a peep about Crystal Pepsi coming back until I walked out back and saw pallets of it. Me and the night shift cashier got curious. So we scanned a bottle. It was in the system, so we bought a ton and took it home. A week later it was revealed to the public and I was already sick of it and the heartburn it caused. When I was 8, my friend's dad worked for Scholastic and she said the next Harry Potter book was going to be called The Order of the Phoenix. I told her that sounded like bullshit. As a huge Harry Potter nerd now, I'm sad I didn't embrace knowing so early. I was part of the unit that first started using military drone aircraft. No one knew for 2+ years until it was announced to the public. But the people of the base we were on didn't know for another 1+ year. Even now it feels wrong to tell anyone even though we were told we could.